I am Mr. Rayworth. I'm an assistant head teacher at Chorlton High School. I work closely with Year 10 and alongside the pastoral team for personal development and tutors, looking after things like enrichment and stuff like that as well. Our focus for this evening is going to, like I said, start with some common messaging around our assessment processes. So our summer progress test for students in years 7 to 10. Then we're going to look at some pathway processes that are taking place for students that are in year 7, 8 and 9. I'll give you an update and the latest information regarding our mobile phone processes and our no phone school policy. And then we'll switch focuses into looking at digital safety messaging as requested by parents and carers for this evening's session. In terms of this session, it is being recorded, so it will be published on the school website in the next week or so, and then I will try and make sure that we've got some condensed messages that can go out as a communication if anybody wants to kind of go back through and read any of the information from tonight's session, if you find it useful, if there's anything more specific that you want to draw back on. With regards to where we're going to start looking at our summer assessment processes. Now, in Chorlton High School, we have 2 learning cycles within each academic year. Our learning cycles focus on our curriculum model and our curriculum design, and a lot of our learning cycle 1 was completed with that first progress test, which took place just before the half term in February. And then since then, students have continued to learn in the classrooms and will learn all the way through to the end of the academic school year in classrooms, and that's our learning cycle 2. So the idea is that at the end or towards the end of the school year, we will then do another round of assessments where we look at just capturing students' progress this academic year so that we can kind of then plan our curriculum and design and our assessment practices for the next year, and see what we might need to recover, see what's been successful, any areas of adaptation that we can make, but equally so what we can best then do to support students. Assessments for progress tests will take place in classrooms for all year groups. So year 7, 8 and 9, they will do their assessments similar to in the spring term. They will complete those assessments in the classroom with their teachers. If they have additional time or any exam arrangements in place, those will be honoured by their classroom teacher. The slight difference is for year 10. Now year 10, because they're getting ready for their year 11 journey next year, they will have exams in the exam hall, so a bit more like a formal mock. So this is their first opportunity to get familiar with the exam process and the routines that are required of them when they go into the exam hall. That gears them up towards their year 11 journey when they'll have their mock exams in year 11. But for year 7, 8 and 9, that will be in their classrooms with their teachers during their normal lessons. At the minute, we're trying to capture all of the information regarding progress tests. So what we would normally do around assessments like progress tests is we would share that information with students, parents, and online so that we can give you advanced information about what's being covered in assessments. And then we'll start to map out when some of those key assessments will take place in their classroom lessons. So specifically, we will go in and we will let you know when the English, Maths and Science will be, and then we'll start to then give students information about other exams like their foundation subjects, geography, history, technology, computing, PE, etc. This process is very similar to what the students have done already. It's just a further capture of their progress this academic year. But our progress tests will take place between Monday the 15th of June and Friday the 26th of June. It's a 2-week cycle for assessments, and then that follows with a 2-week feedback session. So teachers will have had time to then mark assessments, provide some feedback to students, and then they'll do some learning development based on their outcomes at that point. That then very much gears us up towards the end of the school year when we can get ready for our enrichment and LE days, which you'll get more information about later in the summer term. Beyond that, there are some specific messages. So if you are a year 7 parent, this will be information that is relevant to you for the next moment or two. And then I'll do something similar for year 8 and for year 9. Now, for students that are in year 7, when they go into year 8, they will have the option to study just one language. So at the moment, students have got both French and Spanish on their timetable. Now, the language that they choose in year 8 will likely be the language that they will go on to study again in year 9, and then they will go on to study that as their GCSE chosen language. Their choice should be based on really the language that they are enjoying the most and they're feeling the most successful in. It can be something that they've flourished in as a subject. It could be something that they've got a pursued interest in as a language, not a subject that they're choosing because their friends are also doing it, because this is something that we would like them then to carry all the way through to GCSE. Equally so, a number of our students are bilingual, they speak multiple languages. So if they are a native speaker of either French or Spanish, it's not recommended that they opt for their native language because they would be more than likely entered for that as a GCSE option anyway. They would do that as an additional language. So when it comes to students in year 7, they will have the choice in the next few weeks to choose either Spanish, and they will do 2 hours of Spanish in year 8, or they will choose French and they would do 2 hours of French in year 8. Now, if there is enough demand for it, what we would look to try and do as well is if students want to study both French and Spanish, we will let them have that choice to study both. But again, that's going to be determined by whether or not there is enough demand for that so that we can lay on an extra class, or if we could put together more than one class based on that. Now, students will make their choices in form time. They will be taken to a computer room where they can then complete a Microsoft form document just to identify what their preference is with regards to the language options. So it'd be Spanish, French, or for some, they might choose to do both, where they would get an hour of French and an hour of Spanish in year 8. When it comes to year 8 currently, year 8s are moving into year 9, and they have an option to then choose and focus specifically on an arts elective. So in year 9, students will experience not just their English, Maths and Science curriculum, they'll continue to study history and geography and EPR. They will have French or Spanish, depending on what they've chosen. They will have PE, art, music, technology and computing, but they can choose an arts area to study in one additional level of detail. So we will be asking students to choose from one of the following subjects as their arts elective. When it comes to the arts elective, they can choose dance, drama, music, music technology, or visual art. Now, again, what we would commonly see is that students that maybe choose drama would possibly then go on to choose drama as a GCSE option. So having that greater depth of learning in year 9 helps them support them then with their GCSE options moving into year 10 and year 11. Equally so, it will be the same for students that choose dance. That's not to say that they have to stick to it, but they are getting extra lessons in those subjects. And so it will be more beneficial if they were to then choose that as a GCSE option, that they've had those extra opportunities to learn. When it comes to year 8 choosing that, they will then go into year 9 with the options process. So when they choose their GCSE options, which will be done in the February of year 9, they will be choosing subjects based on the following criteria that we have outlined. So students will choose an arts subject. They would choose a humanity, so either geography or history. They would choose a language, which would more than likely be the language that they've continued to study since the start of year 8, but they will have been studying it since they joined high school. And then students will get a general option on top of that. So that would then be maybe where they might choose to do a technology or PE, or they might choose a vocational subject. When it comes to them going into year 9, there is a full program that sits behind all of that. So they'll have presentations and information with key staff. They'll have options evenings and then options interview as well. So at this point in year 8, we're asking them to focus on choosing an arts elective ready for the start of year 9. And similarly, they'll complete that during form time, where they'll submit their request, and then we'll put together the timetable for next year based on their chosen preference. With year 9, their options process is very much underway at this moment in time. Year 9 students have chosen their GCSE options, and I know a lot of parents and students are quite keen to see if they've made it into their chosen classes and they've got what they wanted. What we try and do at this point is build a timetable that supports the options that year 9 have chosen. So as well as making sure that our current year 10 and 11s are fit into the timetable for next year, we then want to make sure that we are honouring the options that students in year 9 have chosen. So they will have had their options interviews, they'll have chosen their GCSE options at this point. But at this moment in time, what's happening is the timetabler is creating the timetable and trying to make sure that all of those options can fit into that. And then we will share that with students later in the summer term. But in terms of what they've chosen, they will have had to complete a compulsory core subject. So they will have had to do their English, which will be English language and literature. So that's 2 GCSEs, which they'll study for 8 hours over the 2-week cycle. They will have their GCSE maths, again, 8 hours over a 2-week cycle. Science, which will be GCSE science for all. And then in year 10, it will be either combined science, which is 2 GCSEs for science, or it will be triple science, where it will be 3 individual GCSEs. They will get their RE lessons, which is respect lessons, which will be 1 hour a week, and they will get their PE lessons, which will be 1 hour a week as well. And then when they go into year 10, they've gone through the arts process. So for each of those foundation subjects that are part of their GCSE options, it's 5 hours. So again, it's an arts, a humanities, an MFL, a language, and then their general option. And that basically designs their curriculum time for year 10 and year 11. With regards to the options process, again, that's all taken place. For year 9 next year, like I said, that follows a very clear pattern. So if you're currently a year 8 parent thinking about the year ahead for a year 9 student, well, in autumn term, they will have their options processed through assemblies where they'll learn about the subjects that are on offer to them. They'll have a presentation from each curriculum area explaining what the subject looks like, how it's assessed, the types of things that they're going to study on that GCSE course. In the spring term, they then have their options evening. So that's, again, an opportunity for them to come and speak to teachers and staff and find out a bit more about the subjects. And that's equally so an opportunity for parents to do the same thing, come and find out a little bit more information. And they'll have their options booklet to support. And then once they complete their options process, they will then speak with a member of staff and discuss their choices. So it's quite an informed process. And then similar to this year, the timetable is then designed and created. And then if we need to have a further discussion with individuals, we will speak to them about the option choices, but they will find that out before we break up for the summer term. So that is a few kind of key messages that link to some specific year groups. The next area that I'd like to focus on is to look at and speak to you about our mobile phone updates in schools. So the government has recently issued a non-negotiable national expectation that all schools operate mobile phone-free environments by default. So under that expectation, phones must not be used or visible at any point during the school day. And we've communicated this before the Easter break. We've sent and will be sending further communications and reminders to families about what this means. But this also includes before school and after school. So what we're saying very much is as students enter the school grounds, the school gates in the morning, we would not expect to see or hear their phones being used, or we would not expect to see them using them for messages. Equally so during lessons, during transitions, so when they're going from one lesson to another, at break time, at lunchtime, or anywhere else on the school grounds. And as much as that applies to mobile phones, that message also applies to smartwatches and any other device capable of communication or recording. So it's pretty clear for us that we've got now this very succinct message, which is that we are a no phone school. So we are following our government's position. So using any of the below during the school day is considered a breach of government guidance and therefore unlawful within the school environment. Schools may only permit exceptions in rare exceptional circumstances. And the national stance is unequivocal. Phones have no place in the school day. Now, I'm aware that there is a number of parents that are very much for this change and they're very pro the use of no phones during the school day. There's a divide with some parents who would like their children to have their phones on them. We think we've got a good balance where we're saying that the students can carry their phone if that's something that parents wish for them to do, but we are not allowing them to use that phone during the course of the school day. When it comes to that and the discussions that we've had, really what we're trying to think about is that we're making sure that we're really clear with students and transparent about what the expectations are here. So phones, headphones, smartwatches, internet-enabled devices are not to be used on the school grounds. And we've looked at the academic research that sits behind this, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. But realistically, what we're saying to students is that the away rule means that for students, phones must be off and away at the school gate. If a phone is used, seen or heard beyond the school gate from the beginning of the day until the end of the day, it will be confiscated. This mandate applies to both phones, headphones, smartwatches and other digital devices. If headphones are worn or seen, the headphones and phones will be confiscated also, because the implication there is that if you're using headphones, you're using a phone to play audio. It applies beyond the school gates from arrival until school, leaving the schoolyards, and it includes the use of those technology devices on corridors and stairwells. If they are seen using these devices on CCTV, again, it would result in a confiscation, and they're not to be used or seen or heard anywhere. So again, off and away and in bags all day. So we're trying to be as clear and succinct to the students as we can to make sure that it's really clearly understood by them as to why we've taken this stance and what we expect of them. And like I mentioned a moment ago, we do look at the evidence basis around all of this when making these decisions. We know that mobile-free zones in the classroom help boost attention, they help to improve behaviour, but they also help to improve learning outcomes for our students. It reduces incidences of cyberbullying and social pressure, as well as any mental health strains that students might be facing. Equally, it allows students to have a digital break in their day. By being in the school environment and not surrounded by mobile phones and technology and messaging and social media, they're having a digital break. They're able to focus on their learning in the classroom, but they're also improving their social interactions with their peers when they're conversing and having conversations at break and lunch. It can strengthen safeguarding routines and systems as well. And it also helps to promote stronger relationships for our students. And what we're seeing is, obviously, since the start of the summer term, which I know we're obviously only on our second day, the school environment seems a lot more conducive to students having really positive interactions with each other at social time. It supports consistency with our behaviour policy and a calmer school culture in the round as well. But also, this aligns with parental expectations and existing school practice. So parents are expecting us to take a firm stance when it comes to mobile phones. We've taken a firm stance, and we've said for a number of years now that it should be off and away all day. But we're being really, really clear now that it's a no phone school. So the expectations is it's not seen or heard, it's not being carried and held in the hands. It should be off and away in a bag and not something that is visible and on their presence. So when it comes to what our expectations are for students, what we've said from summer term, we've given them a grace period, we've given them the advanced warnings and the consequences that are being outlined just here for yourselves. But if the phone or digital device is seen, used or heard beyond the school gate, it will be confiscated by a member of staff, or it will be reported for confiscation by a senior member of staff. Once that phone or device has been confiscated, it will be put in a secured labelled envelope. It will be then stored securely in a locked area. A behaviour point would be issued and a text message would be sent home to parents. And then from the summer term onwards, the phone would have to then be collected from parents at reception anytime before 4 p.m. Now, if a phone is confiscated twice in a half term, the phone would be then expected to be handed to the head of year at the start of each day. If there's any issue with confiscations, it would mean that we would then invite parents to collect the phone from the student immediately. And if we need to use our CCTV systems to routinely watch for any use of mobile phones, again, that could result in confiscation or immediate confiscation of the device. So we've explained that messaging to students in assemblies before Easter. We've reminded them yesterday when they've had their welcome back and reset assemblies, and we will continue to give them gentle nudges. But there has been, since the Easter break, a sharp decline in the amount of phones that are being confiscated in and around the school building. So our guidance is, I think, quite clear. We've continued to engage with students and families and members of staff in school to figure out the logistics of what this looks like. But again, if a phone's seen, it will be confiscated, it will be secured in a labelled envelope, secured somewhere secure in the school building, and then a behaviour point issued, a text message home, and the expectations is that would then have to be collected by a parent, and there will be somebody in reception until 4, unless parents want to let us know when's a more convenient time for them to collect it. But that is our stance moving forward with regards to mobile phones. There's a couple of changes there to the messages that we had before the Easter break. In terms of general messaging, that is everything at the moment that we had as a summer term update. The next focus and next part of this presentation is going to be focusing on supporting children's digital lives. Now, I am somebody who works and focuses a lot on digital safety and digital wellbeing in school, and I'm aware that this is a huge area to try and cover in a very short space of time. So my focus is going to be to try and cover some areas, but some areas will overlap when I'm talking about different maybe social media platforms. So if I do sound like I'm repeating, it's because I'm trying to break down by specific area or specific social media platform when I'm talking through some of the different ones that we know that our students will be using. What we're focusing on here is that, when it comes to supporting children's digital safety, it is a shared responsibility, not just between families and schools, but also wider society as well. We're aware that students and children now live in really digitally complex worlds and spaces where their digital time is really tightly intertwined with their time present in the real world. And, as much as we might sometimes face difficulties in school, parents also express that they're facing difficulties about how to try and find the correct balance when it comes to supporting their children or their young person, making sure that they're not accessing harm online and they've got a nice safe space that they can do so that still allows social time and play time and has a good balance for them. But when it comes to digital areas, what we need to be aware of is that actually it can be quite overwhelming, especially, if you think about, different generations. I grew up in an era whereby mobile phones became quite prominent as I became a young adult. It wasn't something that I'd had through my entire lifetime. So parents can face difficulties trying to keep up with quite a fast changing digital space and what's happening online and the risks that young people can become exposed to. What we're expecting here is that we can give you hopefully some practical advice, maybe try and demystify some areas, but also try and help to encourage some open parent-child communication when it comes to digital spaces and social media platforms, and try and find what, we're calling the right balance. What we can't say necessarily is that there should be no encounters at all with the online world or social media, because that's something that is going to become quite prominent for them as they go through their teenage years and become young adults. So hopefully this session will empower people a little bit to be able to then kind of think about staying engaged and proactive when it comes to their young person's digital space and their use of the digital environment. Something that's quite important when it comes to all of this as well is, sometimes an instant reaction is going to be to try and confiscate and remove or eliminate the threat of an online space. And whilst that can be done in some instances, sometimes having an open dialogue and trying to make sure that it's being used effectively can help to establish better boundaries for children. So communication is something that is going to have to be something that is considered here. Having open and calm discussions where students feel it's safe to share about their online experiences without necessarily having a fear of punishment is going to be important. Confiscation can harm openness in some occasions. Obviously, when it comes to your parental decisions, that's up to you what you choose to do. But actually, thinking about having open dialogue and thinking about, engaging in that conversation rather than confiscation can help lead to better discussions and dialogues should a student or young person feel at any point that they're in jeopardy or in trouble, or something that they've seen online isn't quite productive or helpful and it's quite harmful to them. If we can create those safe spaces, it just means that we can be working better in collaboration and hopefully empowering children to foster those relationships of mutual respect with school, with families and your parents, but equally so with the online space itself. When it comes to setting healthy boundaries, sometimes, people ask us, what is a healthy boundary? What should we be concerned about and thinking about? Well, when we look at the current statistics, 69% of people aged between 8 and 15 are spending more than 2 hours a day on screens. And what we're starting to see is there's a rapid increase in the number of hours that's being spent on a screen during each typical day or during the course of a week. 23% spend more than 4 hours a day on a screen. Now, when we talk about screens, we talk about laptops, iPads, tablets, gaming, using their mobile phone. It's a considerable chunk of time, and it's up to you as parents to decide what are those parameters that you're setting. So, do you want to encourage family connection by just saying, actually, at dinner time, there's no phones at the dinner table? This is something that we try and encourage when we're running school trips. For example, I last week was in Paris with a group of Year 9 students on a school trip, and we said to students, this is dinner time. It's no phones at the dinner table, and students are responsive to that and respect that as having a moment where actually at this moment in time, it's more important that I'm present than I'm engaging in my phone while I'm trying to eat and have dinner. A lot of parents also choose to have rules and expectations around no devices in the bedroom. The importance here is that actually that can promote better sleep and more consistency with sleep. When we look at the statistics for the time spent online, it's the times specifically that are spent online as well. There's an increasing number of hours where young people are spending time online in the middle of the night. The increasing amount of time that's being spent online between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. is quite concerning. Screen-free time is something else that helps to promote better balance and having a life offline. So, allocating times in the day where, a young person should be present in the real world rather than being online or looking at a screen. And making sure that you've got these models where you can have these healthy habits where they can explain how they're using their mobile phone means that you can get better cooperation when you need to discuss the use of mobile phones and technology with young people. But when it comes to responding to online risks, there are some quite common online risks that we in school are quite familiar with and we can deal with on a number of occasions throughout the course of each school week or term. One of the common areas that students are exposed to is areas of cyberbullying, where because there's this digital space, there's not necessarily the expectation of a real world consequence. So cyberbullying can become more prominent the more time young people spend online, as well as the exposure to inappropriate content. But also, there's an increasing number of videos out there that are designed to encourage young people to look at certain types of content, algorithms being used to try and promote online videos, maybe linked to self-harming. But actually, if you can reduce the amount of time spent online and you can try and reduce how social media is being used, it can have an impact on what they're being exposed to when they're online, spending time on social media or engaging on online spaces. Equally, and towards the end of this session, I will give you some pointers on where to go to report. So reporting is and can be effective if it's done in the right way and it's used on each of the platforms that young people are using. We actively encourage this when we teach them in respect lessons or when I speak to them in assemblies about digital safety, about how to report instances where they've been subject to maybe abuse like cyberbullying or they've seen harmful content. Having an understanding of what to report, when to report, and how to report it is going to be quite important. And also recognizing from a parental perspective some of the warning signs as to when there might be some difficulties that a young person is facing. You know, when there is a mood change or a slight withdrawal, or there's this newfound secrecy and protection around maybe a device or their belongings or their private life, it can sometimes be a little bit of a trigger warning that there is potentially something happening in online spaces. There could be a slight decline in their academic performance, which could be an indication that, again, a young person's suffering from some form of distress that they're being exposed to in an online space. So, you know, when it comes to online risks, again, it's knowing what to look out for and how to look out for it, but also how to engage and have the most appropriate dialogues. Another area that is continuing to become increasingly used, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail later as well, is the use of AI. Now, AI is something that we hear a lot about in the media. AI can at times be dismissed as quite a negative. There are lots of positives around AI as well. It's having the balance of knowing how to use that in the most appropriate way. When it comes to young people, the most common way that they're going to use AI at the moment is by going to sites and apps like ChatGPT for homework or to create ideas and designs or for entertainment. It's important we recognize that actually AI isn't necessarily going anywhere, but it's looking at how is it used in the most effective ways so that it doesn't have an impact on the amount of effort that is being put into a piece of work, for example, or that students can be quite discerning with their awareness of the information that they're getting. Are they, being misguided and misinformed, or are they being exposed to fake or false information or AI generated images that can be classed as deep fakes? So guidance from parents is quite important here, understanding what is the role of AI and encouraging young people to be critical thinkers and aware of actually, this is what you could be seeing online, but there's a false element to that if it's been created and generated and not necessarily an accurate depiction of something. So we talk about that in the context of ethical use of AI. But equally so, AI does in itself support digital literacy and resilience, but if it's done in the correct way. Students can use AI in a number of different ways, be it through creating tags and captions on social media, all the way through to finding out facts and information, maybe as a part of a piece of homework. What we have as well is open and closed AI. So open AI servers are the ones that are probably a little bit more harmful because they are not as regulated and they are not as secure with personal information. They again can start to feed a lot on the information that's being created, and they tend to learn how AI is being used and can sometimes manipulate information a little bit or have a bit of a distorted perspective on it. Whereas closed AI is a little bit more secure. We have Copilot in school, which is something that we are able to monitor a bit more closely. We use Smooth Wall as well, so we can get any flags and warnings if somebody's typing something inappropriate into something online. But AI essentially is here to stay, and it's something that I suppose we just need to learn to communicate the effective use of it and the ethical use of it. And being aware that there are at times lots of opportunities for misinformation or falsehoods that students can be exposed to. Now, what I'm going to try and do as quickly as I can, like I said, there's quite a lot to cover when it comes to digital areas, is to try and look at, firstly, screen time as something that is an area of concern. And then I'm going to try and go through some areas of different social media platforms that are commonly used by our students. And then I'll try and round that out with some information about location settings and how you can set restrictions and put privacy in place But equally so, what's important as well is knowing how to report if there's any areas that are of concern. So if I skip through to screen time, like I said, the number of hours spent on day is becoming a concern. So what we're talking about here is excessive screen time and its impact on students' well-being. It means that, if you're spending time on a screen, you're reducing the amount of physical activity that you're doing as an individual. It can increase stress and reduce your mood or lower your mood, so that you are not necessarily engaging as much. But it can equally so, if screen time's being used late at night, cause sleep disruption. So what we sometimes see is that students are coming in sluggish, lethargic, a bit tired because they've been looking at their screens quite late at night and then have had a disturbed sleep pattern. It can have a negative impact on their memory as well as their behaviour and their readiness to learn in the classroom. There can be a reduction in the amount of time that they're able to spend paying attention in the classroom or their concentration levels, especially if you're using social media apps where you get these quick win videos or these quick scroll pictures where you can look at something quite quickly and then when you finish with it, just move on. It means that there is then this lack of attention that's being spent on individual things that are taking place. So the attention span level or the amount of time being able to control their focus reduces. But screen time can also lead to this social disconnection because you're spending time in this virtual world. You're losing the art of having these conversations face to face and bonding, interacting with peers or family members, which can then have a negative impact with communication skills. And sometimes if you're spending a lot of time online following specific accounts, or when you're gaming, connecting with very specific people, you're not necessarily getting to see a broad range of perspectives from a broad range of different people. So it can have an impact on role model and healthy role modeling. It could mean that certain students become influenced quite heavily by certain adults and adult behaviours. So equally so, as much as we have these areas where students are interacting online, there can be these negative interactions which can have greater consequences. So when it comes to advice and guidance relating to screen time, again, trying to encourage having this balanced time where they're spending time, yes, maybe on their devices, but having these moments and opportunities where they're outdoors or doing something different or having periods away from the screen so they're able to connect in the real world as much as we would like them to. And then, as adults, we can lead by example. Modeling what healthy screen habits look like for us can then be reciprocated by young people, and trying to normalize the boundary between, what is appropriate screen time and not, to try and reduce the resistance that we might feel when we're telling students to come away from the phone for a period of time. Agreeing things like a tech-free zone or tech-free times. I mentioned this a bit earlier. Having these no phone zones in your home where you're saying, like at the dinner table, we don't use our phones, having this space in the bedroom where your device, if you're going to charge it, it's charged outside the bedroom door, rather than next to the bed where there's this constant temptation to maybe look at a message, is quite important. Manage the use of devices at night time is important. Maybe having a shared area where the phones and devices are charged away from the bedroom. Having even something as simple as a mute policy where you expect them to have their phone muted at night so that there's no pings from messages or interactions that are a distraction. So unless it's something like a homework time when they need their device maybe to do some homework, or they're doing something quite specific, it gives them that break and that disconnect from the screen for a period of time. And again, like I mentioned there, finding this balance of family time, just to try and reinforce time away from the screen, will be quite important. As much as I've said there as well about like bedtime routines, having wind down routines is quite important. One of the things that I encourage students as well is that actually, if you are somebody who needs a bit of a wind down time, having a podcast versus watching videos, something that you can listen to versus something that you're seeing, can actually help prepare better sleep routines. So maybe encouraging audio books or podcasts as an alternative to spending time watching videos allows them to, get proper rest or be able to wind down a little bit before sleep, and help also, things like podcasts or audio books help to improve sleep quality as well. And then, beyond all of this, the other thing that we can try is then digital detoxes, where we have this, half days of screen breaks or occasional screen-free days, just to try and have these healthy boundaries in place for young people. Looking at WhatsApp now, again, many of us might be familiar with WhatsApp and how it's used. Obviously WhatsApp, our bigger concern with WhatsApp is that it's this platform that allows for these easy creation of group chats. Um, you know, with platforms like WhatsApp, there has been some element of privacy through end-to-end encryption, whereby there is this kind of secure element to it. However, end-to-end encryption policies are always changing. There was something recently about WhatsApp's end-to-end encryption not necessarily continuing with the next update of the software. So, that then means that this element of privacy that some young people think they've got in certain chats isn't as private as they once thought it was. But the risks here are things like the pressures that can be created through a group chat, where people are exposed maybe to hurtful comments, unkind behaviour, which could then quite quickly reach a larger audience because there's multiple people in this chat. It can mean that there is this quicker spread of misinformation. You can see sometimes within a group chat when messages have been forwarded and how they've been signaled in different directions, which can be quite upsetting for some young people. And then you've got things like the ability to do things like chat locks, where some people can be hidden behind these biometric walls and stuff like that, which can then lead to some other inappropriate conversations taking place in the absence of some young people. With some features in WhatsApp, students are able to share live locations, which is something that we would obviously encourage that they didn't do. If it was something that they did maybe as part of a family chat, that might be something that you want to encourage so that you can monitor and track where a young person is. But if they're doing that, rather than dropping a pin location, which also I would argue is quite harmful for a young person, if they're sharing live location and forget to turn that off, that's this constant ability for somebody to be tracked and traced. So being aware of actually what are some of the key risks around WhatsApp and group messaging platforms like WhatsApp is quite important, because we would obviously want them to kind of keep their privacy settings as private as possible. Other things would include the use of the AI integration in WhatsApp, disappearing messages, providing misconceptions, or this idea that something that can quite quickly disappear doesn't have any consequence, despite the fact that some of that data might still sit there in a server somewhere. And there is an increasing number of WhatsApp scams and messages that come through WhatsApp, rather than we might be used to them through emails or text messages. Some scammers and people that work online in a negative way are quite au fait now at being able to take over and access WhatsApp message groups and threads, and being able to coerce and spread misinformation or to potentially scam within a WhatsApp chat. So in terms of best of advice that we can share, it will be, again, encourage the use of careful sharing. We talk to students about their digital footprint, thinking before they post and they comment, before they forward a message, because once it's shared, it could be circulated beyond their control. So if they're choosing to share a picture, they've not necessarily got that control of that picture anymore, because it's been shared in a group chat where it can be forwarded or screenshot by other people. Discussing privacy, being aware of the scams and what potential scams there are. Where possible, try and enable two-factor verification. Adjust group settings. So if they're going to have group chats, making sure that they're limited to only trusted contacts. And then where they're using live locations, make sure that they're doing so either briefly or safely, but making sure that they remember to disable that when it's no longer required. Pardon me. Another area would be Instagram. Now, Instagram, is still really popular for people specifically between the age of 13 and 17. So it says around 70% of 13 to 17-year-olds are using WhatsApp. So I think a lot of us will in 2026 just assume that the platform will be TikTok or Snapchat. Actually, Instagram remains quite prominent as well. The risk here is excessive use of screen time, or if they think that other people are posting pictures, there's this fear of missing out element where they want to see what everyone else is up to and maybe be part of these stories and posts that are being created by others. If they feel that there's going to be this element where they're being left out of photos or chats and messages, then maybe if they feel like if they're not generating enough content, they're not going to get enough likes. It can create this element of low self-worth because they're not getting the same a number of likes that their peers might be getting. Can be something that is a bit of a risk to some young people as well. And then with features in Instagram, like the ability for them to live stream, it allows real-time interaction with strangers. It means that there's exposure to inappropriate comments, and pressure to act in maybe an attention-seeking or a riskier way. Now, the risk of that when students go live is if their account isn't private, that becomes quite exposing to other people. Other people can easily identify and find that account or could be linked into it. So again, above all else, with any social media platform that students are using, it's important that they know to have that account secured and protected so that it's not something that can be accessed just by anybody. They can allow specific people to be a follower, or they can follow very specific people based on their interactions online. If they don't have these secure accounts, it means that their pictures, their interactions can be viewed and seen by multiple people, even strangers that they don't know. There is this new integration as well more recently with Threads, which is, I suppose, Instagram's version of what was Twitter is now X. This again is just this ability for these public discussions that can potentially allow them to interact with strangers online, people that they aren't familiar with. It could be then this exposure to age inappropriate content as well as the use of things like AI chatbots. With AI chatbots, it's almost like young people are treating the AI chatbot as a friend because it's linked to their accounts, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's an accurate depiction, specifically if they don't know who that person is. So privacy expectations might not necessarily match the reality when it comes to features like AI within Instagram. Because they've got an account and it's got AI enabled, they might assume automatically that the AI is a friendly version because it's on their accounts. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. Instagram also allows users to schedule direct messages. So rather than the expectation that you can send a message and it will get sent instantly, with Instagram, you can feature a scheduling approach to the messages. So if that is the case, it can mean that students, if they've got their phone sleeping next to them in the bedroom, and someone's scheduled a message to arrive at 2 a.m., that there's going to be that ping, that notification that there's this new message. So that will be something that will be a concern because it can then obviously lead to disturbed sleep patterns. So when it comes to Instagram, our advice would be that we use inbuilt supervision and parental controls. Be really clear about having these open, ongoing conversations. It could very well be that you encourage young people to share their login details with you so that you also have access to the account so that you can monitor it, or that they can have the account as long as they allow you to follow the account as well. Be mindful that sometimes if a student is really insistent on and what really wanted to, they would then create maybe a second account, or they could create an account that isn't known to a parent or guardian. But have real clear boundaries about what account they have and whether or not they're using AI and threads as features within that, for example, on Instagram, and build in some awareness around the people that they're following as well. So influencer culture, again, I think this is something that is here to stay, but the people that they follow that can have influence over them is something that we should be mindful of. Are they all good role models? If they're going to follow specific people or have these role models who are influencers, have you checked that out? Do you think that they're promoting positive content and positive materials that's not harmful in some way? And equally so, we're going to look at Snapchat. So Snapchat is something that I've never personally used. I'm just very, very familiar with it from school and what's happening in our school environments with some young people. But what we have with Snapchat, again, is another messaging platform where people can share photos, videos, messages. And the notion here is that some of these messages will disappear once they've been viewed. So it's the idea that students can send a message and it'll be received by a recipient, but after a period of time, it will then just disappear, which loses an element of accountability. It means that a young person might think that they've got less risk or they've got more privacy because that content will disappear after a period of time. That's not always the case. Again, some of those contents will be saved in Snapchat servers somewhere. But with things like Snapchat, there is obviously AI features integrated. A lot of that feature can be about manipulation of the face, adding different filters and stuff like that, which can lead to areas of impersonation or exposure again to inappropriate content. There are paid features within Snapchat, such as Snapchat Plus and Lens Plus. So they're premium subscriptions which offer exclusive lenses and augmented reality tools. Features like that, which some students may want to engage with, can result in overspending because it's a paid platform where you can get these bolt-ons and add-ons where they feel there's a pressure because maybe their friend has something similar. But again, it's a potential risk because it can increase the amount of time they're spending on the app because they're engaging with it more frequently. There is also accessibility for Snapchat on web browsers, so they can use that maybe on a laptop or a computer, not necessarily just on a phone or a tablet. I think we sometimes assume that some of these apps are just phone-based. It can mean that there is a reduction in how we monitor it and control it as adults. If we're parents, because there's these multiple avenues where they can use it, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're familiar with how they're using it. So we might assume to check on their phone to see if they're using it, but actually it could be that they've got it enabled on a tablet or a laptop instead, which could then lead to unsupervised communication, specifically if this is a platform that you've encouraged them not to be using or working with. Other key risks include, again, exposure to inappropriate content, seeing inappropriate imagery. Sexting would be a concern on there as well, because of this expectation that the message will disappear. There's not a potential consequence to it, or the messaging feature of it disappearing can mean that you can impulsively decide to send a message because it's this quick thing that will disappear and there won't be a consequence to it. The other problem to that is then this idea of sextortion, whereby there's this peer pressure to send nude images or send inappropriate content, because if they don't share it themselves, they're not honouring another person or meeting another person's expectations of them. Again, the temporary nature of snaps can give a false sense of security there. As much as some people think, well, actually, I can send an image and it's going to disappear, that doesn't restrict the ability for somebody else to take a screenshot of a message or of an image and then use that inappropriately. But there's a real problem, I think, sometimes with Snapchat in particular, because there's this addiction to screen time, whereby screen time these snap streaks encourages a daily use of the platform. So you maintain this streak over a week, a month, a year. And so some students will actively use Snapchat so they can maintain this streak of online presence, which, again, inappropriate because that them needing to use it rather than them using it through them wanting to use it. In terms of advice, again, think about using features like Snapchat's got a family safety hub, which gives guidance on how Snapchat works and how its protection tools are in place. Think about recommending who uses it at what age. If you don't think it's appropriate as a platform, you can put restrictions in place, you know, especially if it's maybe a year 7 or 8 students, and you say, well, actually, the guidance is that that platform shouldn't be used until you're the age of 13, so you're not going to use it until then. Students, again, and children can block and report. It's important that they know how to block, how to report other accounts and users specifically on each individual platform that they're using. And again, encourage open discussions so that they can feel it's okay for them to talk if they feel that they're being blackmailed or they're at risk of sexting taking place, or if they're being exposed to harmful online challenges, they're able to discuss it so that they've got a safe space that they can do so, maybe without fear of consequence. And again, maybe sit with a young person and think about reviewing what the privacy settings are that are in place. Sometimes with apps like Snapchat, again, you've got this ability to share live locations and see other live locations for other people. Again, that's an increased risk because it means that potentially people are going to be exposed to, you know, being tracked or traced or followed if somebody else was inclined to do so. I am at this moment in time very aware of the time and that it is 6:30, and this was scheduled to be an hour. I am going to just run over slightly, so it's up to you if you would like to stay. Like I said, I will continue, and then this session will become available online, so that you can catch up at another point. When it comes to the next area that I did want to focus on this evening is TikTok, which we know is quite a prominent platform for a lot of young people, especially in 2026. Again, something that's kind of grown and sparked massively since, you know, 2020 when everybody was locked down in their houses because of the COVID restrictions. There are a number of risks here when it comes to this endless feed of personalized short videos. TikTok uses algorithms heavily to make sure that students are seeing the types of content that they hover on for a longer period of time. So as they're watching a video, if they choose to scroll through it and they've maybe watched a couple of seconds of it, the algorithm is going to learn that actually that's not engaged them. If they spend a bit more time looking at a video, it will continue to push more of that type of content towards them. So with TikTok, again, it's being aware that there are certain age ratings in place for accounts. The age rating for young people is 13. Again, with some features, it's for 18 plus only, depending on what those features are. But again, there's an exposed risk of contact with strangers if the account isn't secure, if it isn't privatized. Those means that the comments are visible to other people. Other people can download their content that they're promoting and pushing onto the TikTok app itself, in the same way that they can download from other people. The risk sometimes with TikTok is that there is a lot of misinformation through these short video clips where there's not necessarily any regulation where somebody's checking that the information is correct. So there's this risk of misinformation, but also radicalization with you know, extremist ideas, misogyny, racism, conspiracy theories, or propaganda, you know, being something that young people are exposed to, which is then where we can start to see a lot of misinformation then manifest itself in opinions of young people when they're in the classroom. TikTok in itself is addictive by its design. You know, it's fast-paced videos, it's instant gratification, it's quick likes, quick views, the quick ability to like a comment or scroll through something means that, you know, it's increasingly used by young people. UK children averaged 127 minutes per day on TikTok in 2024. So actually, you know, over 2 hours of time spent just on TikTok, and that number continues to rise and increase. Overuse of that platform, again, it can affect sleep, mood, concentration. It can reduce their concentration levels because again, it's that quick fix of information, that quick fix of an image, as well as having the risk of things like body image pressures, and the risk and exposure to dangerous challenges. We've seen stories of this in the media, where there's, you know, challenges that are quite harmful, these harmful trends like the blackout challenge, which actually resulted in some real world injuries and some fatalities for young people. With TikTok as well, you know, there is this idea of TikTok coins that can be spent, or the TikTok shop with products that can be bought, promoted by influencers. Purchases on TikTok, I would argue, often are quite impulsive purchases. not necessarily products of quality, but it can be something that is designed because they've seen it and they want it and they want that now, so they will buy it. It's not necessarily something that they want or desire that they've needed. So actually, there's a risk there that they can overspend. If they've got an account on there with money in it, they could spend and just be buying, or overspending, asking for more money, etc. There is also this risk as well around potential data collection for underage users on TikTok. There's concerns been raised around this one. There's some misinformation around how data is collected from TikTok as well. But again, it's important that people are going to engage with TikTok as a platform, that they understand how data is collected from their own personal accounts. But the opportunities here are, again, to have a private account that is secure, that is monitored. It could be that you enable family pairing, so a parent links their account to the child's account, so that you can then put restrictions in place. With TikTok and a child account, you can put screen time limits in place, so they can only see and view content for a small period of time, or something that you determine to be appropriate. Again, open dialogue. Think about blocking in-app purchases to reduce impulse spending, and then recognize any red flags, such as irritability or loss of concentration. And if you need to introduce more boundaries, don't be worried to put those additional boundaries in place if you're concerned about the use of TikTok and how that's being used by young people. What I'm going to go forward to very, very quickly at this point is just to talk about online gaming. Now, online gaming is something that, again, a lot of people will use. They will spend a lot of time online, playing games and interacting with games, with peers, but they can also be at risk of exposing themselves to strangers. Again, if their accounts aren't secure and private, they could be playing games with a complete stranger, having open dialogue and conversation through headsets, voice chats and text messages, being exposed to lots of friend requests, etc. Again, the risk there is that they're exposed to inappropriate language. There's an exposure to potential for grooming, peer pressure, and manipulation. Excessive gaming can lead to a poor balance of time being spent in the real world, as well as having an impact on sleep and physical health. Because if they're playing on an online game, they can play that whenever they choose to. So if they're choosing to stay up till the early hours of the morning playing this online game, it can then have a negative impact on the following day when they're in school or when they need to be paying attention. So we think about the key risks being emotional regulation and potential anger. If they're playing quite violent video games, frustration and anger and aggressive language can become something that's a bit more prominent. There is also a risk of online trolling and harassment, toxic behavior and verbal abuse from other players. Even if it's something they think is being said in jest, it can still be an exposure to poor and negative language. In-game spending and financial pressures, similar to TikTok, could be a risk for a number of young people, but also being exposed to age inappropriate content. When it comes to games, there are opportunities for parents here to think about what games are they exposed to, what they're choosing to let them play, or what they're allowing them to go out and buy as games. Encourage regular planned breaks away from the screen, away from the games, where they're able to go and drink water, hydrate, get some fresh air, move away from the screen for a period of time. Encourage, again, those spending limits and what they can do with any sort of online spending. But also discuss and think about age ratings for games as well. PEGI ratings are the rating system. Many of us might think about going to the cinema or getting a DVD or a movie, and it's rated Universal U or it's rated 18. With games, they are also rated, and there's a number of icons that you'll find on the sleeve of a game or on the website that promotes a game, which tells you the type of content that you could be exposed to on there. So with a PEGI rating, have a look at what that means. With a PEGI rating of 18, the idea is that that game should be played by somebody who is over the age of 18 because it has more mature content within it. It could be that there is information in there linked to drug paraphernalia, or it could be that there is inappropriate language choices. So again, thinking about the PEGI rating of a game, like you might do if you were thinking about a movie choice, is going to be quite important. Again, open dialogue when it comes to building trust allows you to talk about emotional behaviours and stuff like that. If a student or a young person is feeling like they are becoming exposed to something a little bit more harmful. When it comes to reporting, each platform has a reporting process. So when it comes to things like TikTok and Instagram, there are opportunities for you to report any abuse, and for young people to report any abuse that is seen. If there is an immediate risk of danger or harm, the immediate thing that should be done is that there is the opportunity to call 999 or 101 for a local police station. So that would apply if there is a threat, a coercion, live abuse, or an incredible risk of harm for a young person. If there is risk that there is sexual exploitation, grooming, or inappropriate contact with people that they do not know, you can report this directly to CEOP, so that's the Child Exploration and Online Protection Command. CEOP, I'll put the website there, is ceop.police.uk. This links directly to the National Crime Agency. Again, it means that if they're feeling like they're being peer pressured into sharing sexual images, or they've shared a sexual image of themselves, or they're at risk of sexual abuse or exploitation, that if you report that to the police, that will be acted upon by the proper law enforcement. There are other things as well that can be reported too. So there's the Internet Watch Foundation, IWF. So you can report their child sexual abuse material. Maybe that's something they've been exposed to or they've seen online. You can report that through that website there. That's iwf.org.uk. There is also the opportunity to contact Childline, where you can report for maybe an under 18-year-old whose image has been shared, or if there's any confidential information that's been shared about a young person, you can report that, and that would then go to the right people to then act on your behalf or on the behalf of the young person. If the content is harmful but not criminal, so it's bullying, harassment, it's maybe something hateful, self-harm content or impersonation, there's opportunities, like I said, to report directly to the app itself that it's been seen on. So using the in-app reporting tools on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, or WhatsApp, or a gaming platform, to essentially report what's been seen or exposed to. Platforms are legally required to have a reporting system. That's part of the Online Safety Act. So if you're not familiar with where to find that, it might be worth reading the terms and conditions or looking in the settings within each app. If you don't feel that that is doing enough, what you can then do is escalate it further. So you've got the website here, reportharmfulcontent.com, and they will give advice on how to report appropriately. They can escalate concerns directly to a platform on your behalf, and if suitable, it is suitable for parents, schools, and young people. Additionally, because it is an online content and online space, you've got the opportunity to report and complain to Ofcom. So, if you go to ofcom.org.uk, make a complaint, you can then report anything that's been inappropriately seen, or if you're not satisfied with the outcomes of a complaint to an online platform, you can go to Ofcom with that complaint. If there are issues related to cyberbullying or a school-related concern, again, report it to the school, report it to us in school through the admin email address, send it to the head of year directly, and then we will follow using our behaviour policy, anti-bullying policy, and our safeguarding procedures. I apologise that I have tried to skim through, but hopefully there's a couple of takeaways here that you can draw upon. Again, remember that we need to have a balanced support for students spending time online, having balanced and appropriate boundaries that are in place, and open communication. It's about being curious about children and how they're spending their time online and trying to be as proactive as possible. You don't need to be a tech expert. As much as I'm in charge of digital stuff in school, I would not argue that I am a digital expert, but I know what I need to know, so that it means that I'm able to talk to students about digital safety, and being able to stay involved and proactive in their online spaces and interactions when it comes to any incidents that happen in school. So, be proactive, learn a little bit about the apps that they're using, and think about what age restrictions are in place for them. Equally so, you can embrace tools like Digital 5 a Day and activity packs, which help to make discussions around digital activities fun and interactive. And then think about just trying to stay informed about emerging trends or the use of AI and to try and encourage safe, ethical digital habits. There are some further quick links. Just before I go to these quick links, though, what I would like to say is that there are opportunities for you to put restrictions in place. So, think about the restrictions that you want to put in place for online spaces. So, you can content restrict, using your broadband provider, maybe thinking about your Sky subscription, for example, or your EETV subscription. You can put filters and restrictions in place that filter things from like pornography, violence, or other age-restricted content. Sorry. You can use that also to put time limits in place, so that can limit the amount of overall time that's being spent online, limiting spending controls, thinking about making sure that location sharing is something that is considered quite heavily, making sure that they're not oversharing their information or oversharing where they're at any given moment. That can be disabled a lot of the time in app using their settings. And then it's also being aware about, the different number of platforms that could be used. I've talked here a bit about Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and WhatsApp. There is also, Discord, and there is YouTube. Be Real is another one. Twitch is another one. There's lots of different social media platforms out there that students will be wanting to use, or, if their friends are using it, they will also want to use it. It's important that they're aware of actually what are the age restrictions for each of those different social media platforms. I was speaking to a girl in year 7 today about her use of an online platform, and at that point she's not age appropriate to be using Snapchat, and yet is actively using it. So, again, it's something that, there's an age restriction in place. It's important that where possible, we try and hold students to account on what those age restrictions are, because there's a risk otherwise that they'd be putting in their false dates of birth and false information themselves so that they can then use the platform. In terms of any further links and further bits of advice and information, there is a good website called the National College. Now, they also can be followed online on X, and every Wednesday they publish what they call Wake Up Wednesday, where they send out guides and explainer videos about different online platforms or gaming systems, or things, information about VPNs and stuff like that. So it's good for parents to get these quick bits of information, and they're free guides. But you can go to the National College website and find that as well. The NSPCC website has got lots of information for parents about parental controls and the use of AI and different tips and bits of advice that can be followed. Equally so with the NSPCC website, you've got these practical videos that give you a step-by-step, depending on, if you're with Sky, for example, for your TV, it would tell you how you can then, put filters and monitors in place. Internet Matters similarly has different guides and information about, setting up privacy settings step by step for things like WhatsApp or games consoles. And then equally so, if you wanted further information, you could also go to ofcom.gov.uk, where you can find some specific information about the Online Safety Act, because that is something that's the newest piece of legislation, which talks about, online spaces having robust age checks and safer feeds, and reduce contact with strangers. We will obviously reach out to get some feedback from yourselves and hopefully be able to take on some comments about how we can move this forward, if there's any further information and guidance that we can put out for parents. And thank you for your time and attention.